allowing me to watch your film. It was amazing. I loved it. I learned a lot. Like I used to take environmental science in high school and all these different things. So it's a big like thing to learn a little bit more about something I didn't learn about while in high school.
Yeah,
That's great.
you're welcome. Thank
Yeah.
you for that acknowledgement. I'm so glad that you watched it and that you loved it. Such an
Oh,
important message. You know, we've been really committed that the film be good because it had to be worthy of the message that it contained.
oh yeah, I'd been following it since it was first announced, like since Ian announced it on his social media and stuff. That's when I first came across it.
Oh, that's
Yay!
great.
Cool.
That's awesome.
Okay, so my first question is, how would you explain regenerative agriculture to like the layperson?
Regenerative agriculture is a way of farming that is natural. You're farming in the way that nature would have us farm. And the principles of regenerative agriculture are all about building soil health. So there's 6 principles of regeneration that make it different from conventional agriculture. Conventional agriculture uses a lot of tillage and pesticides and herbicides and fungicides. It's often a monocrop, so one crop only. So there's a lack of biodiversity on most of our farms. In fact, there's a lack of diversity on most of our farms. And so regenerative agriculture is all about biodiversity. It's all about keeping the earth covered at all times. It's about having a living root in the soil that also has a symbiosis with animal integration. Like you go on a farm and you don't see any bugs and you don't see any animals. And that's not the way that nature intended. So it's farming the way nature intended. And then lastly, no tillage and farming in context. So you're not going to grow avocados in North Dakota or oranges in Vermont, you know, like you have to farm in your area for what was meant to grow in that area. So those are the basic principles of regenerative agriculture. But the big thing that people need to know about regenerative agriculture is that it's a tool for us to draw down, take all of the carbon we've emitted and put it back into the soil. And by doing that, we can stabilize the climate. And that's been missing from the conversation around climate for decades. And it's an actual viable pathway for how we can regenerate the earth.
Thank you. And so how does that differ from like organic or sustainable farming?
So organic, it has some of the principles of regeneration, but it heavily used, there's a heavy usage of tillage in organic farming. So, and monocropping in organic farming. So that's the big difference between, even though we love organic, the ideal would be regenerative organic. So it's grown organically without pesticides, but also in soil that's healthy and not tilled, and farming in context.
Oh, thank you. That's what I was, that was one of my questions. Yeah, about that. I was
I
like,
mean, regenerative agriculture is sustainable agriculture.
okay.
It's also indigenous agriculture. There's a lot of different names for it.
Yeah.
Sustainable agriculture, regenerative agriculture, but you know, regenerative is a great word because it really gives you the sense of like, we're not just sustaining, because if we do that, we're kaput, right? We're going to regenerate. We're going to take that carbon and draw it down for more food, create more fertile land.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And then like Texas, we're a pretty agricultural state. Like it's a lot of what we do here in Texas. It's a lot of people's livelihoods. If you were to sit down with a Texas farmer, how would you pitch the shift to regenerative agriculture to them?
Well, Texas, as you said, big ag state, a lot of what happens in Texas is ranching.
Yeah.
So I would say the vast majority of Texas ag by acreage is probably running specifically cattle. And what you see when you drive out of the cities in Texas, most of the Southwest, in fact, is land that is heavily degraded. So in Kiss the Ground, the prior movie, and in Common Ground, this movie, we look at the Dust Bowl. What happened during the Dust Bowl? We tore up the prairies, the tall grasses, and we replaced those prairies first with crops. Then when the crops stopped growing, we did cattle grazing. And we segregated the grazing lands with barbed wire, meaning cattle couldn't move across the land. And if you go out pretty much anywhere in Texas, you know, southern Texas, northern Texas, you'll see 2 things. You'll see land that is completely degraded, meaning the soil is porous, most of it is sand, silica, There are grass stands that still exist. But the second thing you'll see is cows not moving. Anytime you see cows in a field not moving, that means the land is going to degrade worse, because the cows are going to eat the fresh grasses, and grasses can't establish their height, they can't establish roots, they can't pull down carbon, and they can't hold the land in place, which means what happens to the soil? It blows away. Which is why, especially in northern Texas, Oklahoma, we have these massive dust storms that shut down freeways. All of that is basically, I'm just going to say it, the wrong way to do agriculture. You're growing less head of cattle per acre. You're growing cattle that are not getting the nutrition they need, so you're going to have to supplement them with corn, and you're not regenerating the land. The flip side, and the pitch to people who are ranching, is what if you could grow a higher stock density, more cattle per acre? You move them more often, you get healthier, better herds, you get a better product at the end, meat that is nutritionally dense, and you don't supplement with corn, or if you do, it's a very small amount of grain. Then what you have left over is tall grasses, strong land, good soil, and good healthy cattle. That's the pitch. People who do regenerative agriculture, especially on the ranching side, 9 out of 10 see a bigger profit margin in the first year. So all the ecological questions, and here's the question that's the pitch. Do you want to make more money or not? If you do, regenerative agriculture provides a way to do that.
And then based off of that, like how it's like you want to make more money in the end, how much is the initial cost for like a farmer? How would you phrase that?
Well, because we're in Texas, I'm gonna keep focusing on ranching. Even though you do have some row crops here, the ranching is really the big business, and the cost to a rancher is largely labor. So labor will increase. You're gonna have more people running the cattle across the land. And it's the cost of time to learn how to do this. It's not the same plug and play system of give cows corn, leave them out in the field. You have to look at grass. You have to pay attention to growth cycles. You have to understand movement of animals. That requires a different use of this tool. And that takes a minute to develop. But we've seen, look, Alejandro Carrillo, who's in the movie Common Ground, he and his ranching community, they're ranching on 2 million acres of the Chihuahuan Desert. So if people go, oh, we don't have enough rainfall in Texas. Oh, we don't have enough grass in Texas. We can't do it. No, try going south where there's a desert and there's less rainfall. And they've established these tall grass ecosystems on sand using nothing but the cattle. And so this shows us that you can learn that cycle. Do you know what Alejandro did before he was a rancher running around in his cowboy hat and boots? He was a computer programmer.
Wow.
And he
Never
learned,
would have guessed that,
and
right?
he learned to do
No.
he learned to do this in a very short period of time. And now he's working with 2,000 ranching families. So if you can go to computer programmer to learning how to do regenerative agriculture in the Chihuahuan Desert, you can go from rancher to regenerative rancher a lot faster. So, the learning curve is the biggest expense, and that's just the fear of learning something new.
Okay, thank you. And then my one of the questions, like a lot of like kind of where I'm from, like the South Central Texas, like San Antonio, the south side of San Antonio. So it's largely a food desert.
Yeah.
How would you how does regenerative agriculture kind of address like social and like political like stuff like that, like cost wise for the public?
Well, it's a great question. The first thing we encourage people to do is grow their own food. Being able to grow your food is being able to have power. If you cannot grow food, you're disconnected from your power, right? So even if you live in an apartment building, you can grow food in a planter box, in a window. We get Instagram messages of people who've converted their whole apartment and they've got things growing everywhere. It's quite amazing. So learning to grow, incorporating that into school programs where we're having school gardens and we're having young children learn how to grow their own food gives them agency over what they're putting in their mouth and where it comes from. That's super important. Community gardens. Maybe you don't have space, maybe your neighbors don't have space, but collectively there's a parking lot that can be turned into a garden. We're seeing that happen across the country. Tremendous amount, 40 to 50% of the nation's food could be grown in vacant lots. That's a lot of food, right? And so we've got planter boxes if you're in apartments, we've got gardens if you're in school, we've got community lots if you're part of a community program. And then if you have a backyard or a front yard, lawns are the most heavily watered and most heavily pesticide laden crop in America. If you've got a lawn, but you don't have food, we've got things backwards. That lawn, that quarter of an acre, which is average for an American household, that can grow the food that sustains your family, including chickens, including protein. So a big part of the movement is getting your hands dirty and getting involved in agriculture. We're also encouraging, California has a program where at farmers markets, if you're on SNAP or food stamps, you can get double your money if you use your money with a farmer at a farmer's market. We're encouraging all farmers markets, all states to adopt that model because we want every single person, whether or not they have access to good food, to be able to use their dollars to get more nutrition. That's a great program. And the other thing is, I've never been to a farmer's market where if somebody doesn't have the money that they want to buy the things, I've never seen a farmer not be willing to negotiate, right? When you're buying direct and you say, look, I've got $10, but I got to feed a family of 6 or 7. Can you double the amount of whatever you're putting in here? Vegetables, apples, farmers are generally pretty cool about working with you. So it's being creative about how you grow your food, being creative about where you get your food, and remembering that there are ways you don't have to convert your whole diet at once. This could be 10% in the first 6 months. See how your family feels. If it feels good, if you're able to make it work, try another 10%. 9 out of 10 Americans are metabolically unhealthy, meaning our bodies are suffering because of the food that we're putting in them. So if we can begin just a little bit to edge off of that trend, you might see a lot less prescriptions in your household and a lot happier and healthier people. And I know it's a challenge. I grew up on food stamps. I grew up very poor. So I had to learn, and my family had to learn how to do this stuff, and it can be done.
Thank you. And then my last question would be, what is the goal, the ultimate goal with this film? Like, how many theaters are you wishing to get into? How far are you willing to spread this message?
I mean, how far are we willing to spread this message? The whole planet. I think everyone needs access to this information of how they can grow their own food, stabilize their own microclimate. If we all do that, then we're suddenly stabilizing the macroclimate. So I think the goal is specifically with Common Ground to inspire 100 million acres in North America into regeneration. And so if we can do 100 million acres, or when we do it, and we're well on our way into regeneration, what that means, that's the tipping point. That's over 10% of American ag land suddenly using these healthy regenerative practices, building soil, and then suddenly 10% of the food that's on the market is regenerative. Suddenly 10% of the money that's changing hand is participating in growing food. And so we really see that as the pivotal moment where this goes from a great idea that's working for some to the moment that this becomes ubiquitous and mainstream. Because once we get to that point, it will prove itself. It'll prove the value to the farmers and ranchers who are practicing it. It will prove the value to the people who are consuming that food and experiencing the health benefits. And then we all benefit from stabilizing the climate and drawing down carbon into healthy soil.
And just to add one thing to that, specific to your question about theaters, for Earth Day, we're doing a national release. AMC is releasing the movie nationally. So we want to see everybody go to a theater on Earth Day, which is April 22nd, coming right up. There'll be theaters in San Antonio, Dallas, Austin, Houston, all the major cities in Texas. We hope to see you guys at the theater. There'll be special content with the movie, special Q&A, and special messages from the celebrities in the film that you won't get to see at any other time. It's just going to be for this special Earth Day release. So,
And if you have a
Yeah.
community or a group that all want to come see it, potentially you could even be one of the hosts of the event. So we want everyone to come out, use the film as a tool to promote the already good work that's being done in your communities and saying, look what we're doing. This is why it's so great, and having the community become aware of that, or to learn more about what is regeneration.